So for all of you that are looking for the secret of cadences, how do I do these in all keys confidently? That's what I'm going to help you with today. So as we have noticed, perhaps if you've already played a few cadences, there are 3 chords that happen in the cadence. So I'm going to use the key of C as our first model, and then we'll try a few other keys before this is over. So in the key of C, we're going to play the 1 chord. That means the chord based off the first note of the scale. So that would be C, C, E, G would be the 1 chord. The 4 chord, we're going to play it in inversion. So instead of spelling F, A, C, we're going to spell it as C, F, A. It's a little easier to reach without a big jump. Okay, so how do I get from those first notes to the 2nd chord? Well, there's a pattern in every key that we play in. So for the key of C, or the key of C sharp, or G flat, or B flat, you use the same pattern. The pattern is this. Take the first chord, in this case C, E, and G, leave the bottom note the same. The middle note of the chord goes up half a step. Half a step means there's no keys in between. What is the very next key? In this case, it's F. The top note was on G. Now I'm going to take it up a whole step. So you notice I skipped 1 key in between from G, skip this black key and go to A. That's called a whole step. So bottom note stays the same, middle note up a half step, top note up a whole step. That's how I got C, F, and A. Okay, now let's take that idea. I'm going to pause there in the cadence and try another key. So I'm just going to walk up and say, now we're going to be in the key of D. So I have D, F sharp, and A now becomes the 1 chord of the cadence. Bottom note stays the same. Top note moves up a half step. What's the very next note past F sharp? We're going to the right, always up, so that would be G. Nothing in between the F sharp and the G, so that's a half step. A whole step above A, I'm going to skip the black key and go to B. So D, F sharp, A becomes D, G, and B. Alright, I'm going to go to one that's maybe a little less familiar. How about the key of E flat? Okay, so my 1 chord is E flat, G, B flat. Bottom note stays the same. Middle note, go up a half step. That's going to be to the black note above G. That's A flat. The B flat, where you were on the top, now goes up a whole step. So I'm going to skip the B and go to C. Yes, E flat, A flat, and C is the 4th chord. So 1 chord in E flat, 4th chord. So you see the pattern works whether you're starting on a black key or a white key, whatever it is, the pattern will work in whichever situation you find yourself in. Now I'm going to go back to C and finish out the cadence. We did the 1 chord, the 4 chord. You always go back home to 1. Now the last chord we need to know is the 5 chord. So that's going to be based off of G. We're going to spell that as B, D, and G. But how do we get there? If we don't know this key, how do we know that? Well, here we go. The C, the name of the chord, is going to go down half a step. Very next note is B in this case. The middle note was on E. It's going to go down a whole step. That's D. The top note stays the same. So, once again, C, E, G, B, D, G. And then we add a whole step below that top note, and that creates the 7th of the chord. So that's B, D, F, G, and back home to C. So what I was hoping you would notice is that for each chord from 1 to the 4 chord, or from 1 to the 5 chord, as I talk you through the half steps and whole steps, you should notice on each pattern 1 note stays the same, 1 note moves a half step, the other note moves a whole step. So once you kind of get that pattern sorted out, it's the same no matter where you start on the keyboard. The pattern will remain true. So I'm hoping that that will give you lots of guidance even if you're faced with a key that you're not familiar with. And the last question you might have is when we did that 5 chord in C, we called this a 7. Why is that a 7? Well, if you're using G as a 5th note of C, okay, so now we're going to take G just for a moment and isolate it. So if this is G, I'm I'm going to put it in root position and spell a G chord. Okay, we've seen that before. There's a G chord. Now I'm going to continue counting above G, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So a G7 would be 7 notes above G. And most of the time when we say G7, we assume the regular G chord plus the 7. When we play this as a cadence, we play the G in inversion, which means the F is very close and in fact right next door to the G. Okay, well I hope that has answered lots of questions for you on the on the cadence in general, not just a particular key, but how to get from one key to another. Before we finish, let's go to one other key that we haven't done yet. We're going to do the key of A major and go from the 1 chord to the 5 chord. That's probably what you need the most practice on, perhaps. So here's A, C sharp, E. There's our 1 chord. Now remembering the rules, we're going to go down the lowest note, we'll go down half a step. What's a half step below A? Well, it can't be G because there's that sharp here. It's got to be the very next note. So it would go to G sharp. That's correct. So we'd have G sharp on the bottom. C sharp goes down a whole step. So that can't be C. That'd be a half. So we go down. There it is. There would be your whole step. So G sharp, B. And the top note stays the same. So that would be the 5 chord for A. A whole step below that would create that 7th for us, G sharp, B, D, E, spelling E major 7, and then back home. So whether you're in flats, sharps, or a scale with no flats or sharps, you can do the cadence simply by following those patterns. Hope that's been helpful to you. Go forth and enjoy.